This is the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast, your source for the strategies, systems, and smarts you need to turn possibility into purpose. Every week, we dive into dynamic conversations as our host, Nicole Greer, interviews leadership and business experts. They're here to shed light on practical solutions to the challenges of personal and professional development. Now, here's your host, a professional speaker, coach, and consultant, Nicole Greer.
Welcome, everybody, to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. My name is Nicole Greer, and they call me the Vibrant Coach, and I am here with another amazing coach and author, Miss Ruth Pearce. Let me read her bio to you. She is a keynote speaker, and we're buddies. We hang out at the NSA Carolinas, DM us and we'll help you. A keynote speaker and an executive coach who brings together ethics, behavioral science, and leadership development to help organizations reduce risk and strengthen resilience. And man, what the world needs now is some resilient folks. She's also an author and educator known for making complex issues clear, practical, and human. And look what she sent me in the mail. She sent me her book, Be Hopeful, Be Strong, Be Brave, Be Curious, How Coaching Can Help You Get Out of Your Own Way and Create a Meaningful Life. And my favorite part of that is the part of a meaningful life. Listen, folks, you only got one life to live. You should make it fantastic. Ruth, I'm so glad you're here, and you're looking pretty fab, I must say. Tell us about, if you go to the YouTube, Ruth has on a new suit. Tell us a little bit about your new suit, because it looks bomb.
Thank you. So I am the president of Women in Networking, the Durham chapter, and we have this amazing woman who makes custom clothes. And for the first probably 3 months that she was a member of the group, she would tell us about her clothes and how she does the stitching, and she showed us all sorts of things about how the stuff is made generally and what the difference is when you have it well made and everything. Yeah. And I just kept assuming, my bad, that it was completely out of my reach. So it's just not something I don't mix.
Right, like how many thousands is that, right?
Yes, exactly. And so one day I said, can we just share with everybody what would it look like if you actually wanted to have something made? And she said, she gave her prices, and very reasonable is an understatement. And I was like, I could actually afford this. So I decided, because I'm going back to speaking, I've kind of been off this year because I was taking the North Carolina bar. And I said, you know what, when I go back into 2026...
She has nothing else to do. Now she's going to become an attorney. Okay, but anyways, go ahead.
Well, that's a whole other story. But yeah, so I was like, when I go back in 2026, I want outfits that I can wear as a speaker that help me feel confident and I belong on stage. And this is the first piece. Now, it's just the jacket. It's actually a pantsuit. But I picked it up on Wednesday. And as we were meeting today, I was like, I've got to give it a little bit of an outing because it's completely custom made and it's from recycled material. She goes and gets material from stores.
Aren't women so cool? Because this lady is a lawyer too, though, right? She just does this tailoring as a hobby or something.
It's her passion, absolute passion.
Oh.
And she's so attentive and everything. And I have this suit cost me about as much as a suit would if I just walked into a store. Except those don't fit me properly.
Right.
This fits me, and it fits me like a suit. I was going to say it fits me like a glove, but so it definitely gives me that sense of I belong in this jacket. It doesn't quite touch the bits I want. The sleeves are the right length. It's just, I'm a happy camper.
Very good. Well, I'm so happy to have you here, and you look like $1 million. All right, let's talk about this book, because I think people want to be all the things in the title. They want to be full of hope. They want to be strong. They want to be brave. They want to be curious. But your book really helps them do that. And the first thing you say in the book is start with who you are. What do you mean by that? Start with who you are.
The biggest question first. Well, years ago, I was on one of these self-development courses that I really enjoyed them. And so I was on this self-development course, and they introduced me to the concept of character strengths.
Yeah.
And there's an assessment you can take. It's the Veer Institute on Character. I took the assessment, and it gave me this readout of what my top strengths are, what the ones are at the bottom that are more difficult for me to tap into maybe. And then the ones in the middle that sort of come and go when I need them. And it was a complete eye-opener for me because all the assumptions I had made about myself were not supported by how I answered this assessment. My first reaction was the assessment is broken. So
Right. Listen, everybody does that, Ruth. I'm like, no, you took the assessment.
Exactly. I answered those questions. So it's like, yeah. So I thought it was broken. And I went back and did it again. And then and got the same results. And I decided to sort of really think about why would those answers be the way they were. So it was appreciation of beauty and excellence, which that didn't really surprise me. But my second one was bravery. And I am a person that all through my life has struggled with managing anxiety. And I was like, how can I possibly be brave when everything completely freaks me out and scares me, right? And then I really thought about it and I was like, but I've done things. I've done things anyway. I've gone, when I first started speaking, when I first started speaking, I was terrified. I'm still nervous, but I was terrified. But I made myself go out and do that. And I look back and the first time I spoke probably wasn't my best. But I did it and I made that step and I learned something. And so I really appreciated this opportunity to think about not how I talk to myself and talk about myself, but to consider how I show up in the world. And so this just set me on a path of really sort of following along with this, because one of the things we know about character strengths is that 70% of people can't name their strengths. They are what we call strengths blind. They're oblivious because we have this interior narrative that's going on.
We have lots of gremlins in our minds, don't we?
Yes. And when we're typically focusing on, well, you didn't do that very well and you didn't say that the way you should have done.
That's right.
And so to just sort of flip the angle 90 degrees and say, how does this show up and how would a standard assessment describe these facets of you was just real eye-opener. And when you start to see that, going back to your original question, what do I mean, knowing yourself, when you get challenged to think about yourself in a different way than maybe others have described you, or you've been told all your life, or teachers are great ones, best will in the world, thank goodness for teachers, but they do have a tendency to say, you're good, you're capable at this, but you're not capable at that. Now suddenly you get an opportunity to look at yourself in a different way and say, maybe other things are possible.
Yeah, 100%. And this first chapter of her book, y'all, is really good. And there's a diagram on page 4. And just to kind of tease it out, she's got a list of words that describe a meaningless life and a meaningful life. So let me just say these. So meaningless, purposeless, directionless, wandering, confused, and uncertain. Right. And so, Ruth, I don't know, I have a little TED talk out there and it's called What Do You Really Want? And I ask people a lot of times in the coaching session, especially at the beginning or maybe even in the onboarding process, I'm like, well, what do you really want? And they go, I don't know. And it's this. And then you juxtapose it against the meaningful things. I have a North Star. I have a purpose. I have clarity. I have belonging, and I'm directed. Yeah. So I love how you've teased that out. So I think people need to get fierce with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the thing that we so often do, and I think part of it is US culture, quite honestly, is we get locked into something. For example, when you're younger, maybe newly with a partner and you've got young children, your purpose may look very different than when those children become teenagers or go to college or things move on, you adjust, you become a new version of yourself and your purpose may change. And that's why I think we see so many people in later life are more focused on doing community work and stuff because they've now got the bandwidth to do that, right? They were giving that to their family and friends and now the family doesn't need it all the time. So now they've got bandwidth to go and make a difference to a different group of people. So I think that's the other thing is always to be considering, is this making me feel like I know why I'm getting up in the morning? And if it's not, maybe it's time to rethink and reconsider. And of course, we're not all challenged, but many, many people are challenged. They have to spend so much effort on just meeting basic needs that it doesn't feel as though they can consider what's really meaningful to them, because, putting food on the table may be the most important thing this week. It only takes really small moments of connecting with that higher sense of who you are to feel a great deal of fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's got on page 6 and 7, I won't read them all, but she has got what we call powerful questions. When I came through my coaching program, it was, like you got to learn to ask powerful questions. And so even if you can't, afford a coach, but you could afford to buy Ruth's book, you could go to page 6 and 7, and she's got questions like this. Who do I want beside me in my life? What is life balance for me? How do I make others listen? What is my story? What is my legacy? But to really sit down with these questions in a pen and paper and write out the answers will begin to help you do this thing, which is chapter 1, starting with who you are. So I think taking a deep, long look in the mirror, or what I like to call the S in my Shine coaching methodology, I think that's so important. All right. So the next thing in here is finding inspiration. So talk a little bit about finding inspiration. How can I get a spirit inside of me to take a hold of me and get me going?
I find that for me personally, and I think each person finds inspiration in different things. For me personally, it is that I said my top strength is appreciation of beauty and excellence. So I get inspired when I'm outside in nature. I get inspired when I see a virtuoso performer performing something, because I
Yo-Yo
see...
Ma. Everybody listen to Yo-Yo Ma today.
Yeah. I actually saw his sister play live.
Really? Well, that probably was pretty dang good too, I bet.
Yeah, it was quite handy, I would say. But seeing those things sort of remind me, now for some people that might be intimidating, so that we each have to find our own thing. But with me, for nature, it's the simplicity. It's like, get back to basics. You look at what creatures are doing, what butterflies are doing and everything, and it's simple and methodical. And so that helps me to get inspired and sort of clear my head. And then seeing what people have been able to accomplish by being focused on something important to them is a reminder to me that I may never get to that level, but if I keep doing a little bit every day, I'm going to get closer. I find those two things inspirational. Yeah. Role models are very important to me. They're very important to all of us, whether we know it or not. Some of them are negative role models. They inspire us not to do something, but seeing those examples and sort of looking at them and then considering, well, what can I take from that and make my own? I personally find that very inspirational.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell mine. My whole thing is personal development. Like, I can remember being a little girl. You probably did this too, though, Ruth. I lined up the Barbie dolls, the teddy bears, my brother's G.I. Joes, the little teeny tiny plastic army men. I got them all in a row. I had a little blackboard. I don't know where I got this blackboard from, with chalk, and I had these magnetic letters, and I would teach. I was a teacher, like when I was 6, and it just hasn't changed. I'm 59. I'm a teacher. I want personal development for me, and I want it for others, but I did not really put my finger on it until I did what you said in chapter 1, which is, what is your meaning and purpose? Mm-hmm. And I'm born to teach and coach and do. I'm sure you feel the same way.
So I'd love to know, when did you realize that? When did you recognize, roughly how old were you when you realized that was the underlying passion behind?
I think I found out in the early 2000s. So I'm going to say when I was 32-ish. And here's the thing, you need a good book like Ruth's book, Be Hopeful, Be Strong, Be Brave, Be Curious. You need a really good book to kind of work you through it. And Ruth's book, everybody, is like a workbook. You're not going to sit down and read it. You're going to read a little bit, and then you're going to do some work, and then you're going to read a little bit and do a little work. And I read a book, because your book wasn't out then, called The Path by Lori Beth Jones. And she said in this book, you're not a mistake. Your life has purpose and meaning. And the reason the world is a hot mess is because not everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. So figure it out. And I was like, well, that seems smart to me. So
the reason I asked about the age is, as I get older and there's less time ahead of me than maybe there has been behind me, I realized that my first 35 or 40 years was really experimenting.
Of course.
Try something, you do this job. If you're lucky enough to be able to really consider how is the job clicking with you and all that. You get data back, right? You get data back, you get data back, you get data back. Mm-hmm. And around about 40, I finally figured out roughly who I was. I mean, it's always being refined, but it was at that point where the sort of all these data points and experiments came together, and I was like, okay, I'm not this. I don't want to do that.
Right.
This doesn't work for me anymore. This really makes me feel like I'm contributing. And I think that's something that it's easy to forget is it takes a long time to have gathered enough personal experiences and data to really be able to sit down and say, this works, this doesn't, especially as in a culture like ours, there's so much pressure to conform with certain expectations. Like my parents were the first people in their family to go to university.
Oh, isn't that good?
But when my sister and I were growing up, they assumed we would go to university.
Right, you're going.
Yeah, because it would be a backward step for the family if we said, oh, no, we're not going to do that. Also, we grew up with that expectation of you will get to university and study at university. Well, when I was first in university, I wasn't ready for it. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't feel like I fit in.
No, and like they want you to declare your major. You're like, what are they?
Yeah. Well, when I went because I went to the school in the UK, we had to absolutely declare our major at the beginning.
Right.
I had to sign up for, I did a bachelor's in
get on economics. This path and don't deviate.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're making all these choices when we really don't have enough data to know if that choice is a good one or not. And that's one of the beauties of being a bit older is I think we can really take a hard look and say, that doesn't work for me. Everyone thought that would be a great fit for me, but it's not. It doesn't feel like this jacket that fits me so well.
That's right.
Yeah, it feels like something, where the sleeves are too long and the zip's too tight. So
yeah. And the thing is, when I did the work, and we're about to hit it right here, chapter 2 of your book, In Your Own Way, normalization, and you correct me if I say anything wrong, but normalization is like, why do I love school so much? Why, when they say, would you like to teach this? Would you like to present? Would you like to speak at this meeting? Would you like to do a lot of homework and then tell us a report? And I'm like, me. Why is that? It seems maybe weird to somebody else, but that is my normal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that what you're talking about in that chapter?
Yeah. So on the normalization front, it from coaching, but the clients show up and again, there's all these stories that they've been told. It goes back to that expectations of other people. It's not normal to want this or to behave in this way or react in this way or do it in this way. And one of the big pieces of coaching for me is to challenge that thought. What does normal even mean? And is it normal? It's like when you go to the doctors. I happen to be someone whose body temperature is quite low. So when I go to the doctors and they take my temperature and it is like 1 degree above what they consider to be normal, they think I am perfectly fine. But to me, that's a fever because my body is not usually all fired up like that. And so that question of, yes, I know they need guidelines and all of the, of what's normal and to be able to measure it. But what really matters is against my baseline, not against the average of everybody else in the world, right? And so this idea of being able to normalize things in terms of who you are, this works for you. This is what makes you the person you are. And it is normal. It's such a huge piece of coaching, I think, is to get people to release that sense that because they're not conforming to what other people want, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah. And growing up, I don't know how your English parents did it, but my daddy from Ohio, who raised me, he would always say, like, don't speak unless you're spoken to. When we go in here, I want you to act like this. Like it was very prescripted what I was supposed to do along the way. And, I did learn my manners and I do know how to have a nice interaction with people I've never met before. So I'm very grateful about all that. But I think the reason why people say, oh, I don't know, or they don't know what their normal is because they just don't, that's not what you do. It's abnormal to find out what makes you special. It seems stuck up or full of yourself or something.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about that question that you read out in my book about what's your story.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
Just recently, someone challenged me to really write down the things that have contributed to me being the person I am.
Right.
And I started writing, and I wrote and wrote and wrote. And one of the things I realized was there were things about my family when I was growing up that for the first 25 years of my life, I blamed those things for me being a certain way.
Oh,
In terms
don't
of,
miss that.
yeah, if it was that I felt really uncomfortable in groups of people, that was my parents' fault because they, didn't socialize me or whatever. And then as I was writing this recently, it was only about 2 or 3 weeks ago, as I was writing it, I suddenly had this flip of, no, I can identify with people who find it very difficult to go into a room full of strangers because I am that person. I've learned ways to manage it and cope with it and be okay. And I can share those with other people. But it doesn't change the fact that fundamentally going into a big room of people that I don't know is difficult. And so then I started looking at all of these things. My father had obsessive compulsive disorder that wasn't diagnosed until quite late in life.
Oh, I bet that was hard.
My mother was depressive. So I grew up in this environment where things, felt a little mentally unstable. Well, again, now I've got the capacity to use that for the benefit of other people. And so all of these things that for such a long time were, this is why I'm broken, are suddenly things where I say, and this is why I can empathize with people. This is why I've had experiences that until recently I hadn't even acknowledged, some Me Too experiences in the workplace and things like that. And it's like all of those contribute to me having the ability as a coach and a speaker to pick up on the energy in the person and in the room. And so now I'm grateful for all of those things. And it really shows you how complicated your story is. Your story isn't linear. It's like goes over here and it goes over here. And then
it is a hot yarn ball mess.
But it's beautiful. It's beautiful for that. And especially if you pull out things that on the surface may look, for want of a better word, ugly. If you can pull them out and then go, but this helps me to connect in this way or to see things in this way, then suddenly it's an asset and not something holding you back.
That's right. Because, the thing that's going through my mind, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know what I mean? You have to write down your story and step back. And the truth is you're traveling a lifeline, right? And so all this stuff is in your past. So it is currently just a story.
Mm-hmm.
And you can decide what to do with that story. So that's so good. And again, in chapter 2, she's got a list of questions on page 23. What are your values? Which choices are true to who you are? What will your future look like if you make one choice or another? Use scales to measure your strength of commitment and emotion. I mean, like she's coaching you along the way in the book, which I think is absolutely great. And coaching you, as she says, into being in your own way. I'm going to say that again, coaching you into being in your own way, which I think is fantastic. All right, let's skip ahead and go to chapter 5. That is about being hopeful and about having expectations. And on page 72, you define hope. So let me go over there real quick, focusing on hope. You've got a quote in here from Bobby McFerrin: in every life we have some trouble, but when you worry, you make it double, right? We all know that song. And you say, hope is a sense of what is possible, how we can make it more possible. And so I think it's true to get on the coaching journey to say, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. You do have to have some hope. Talk about that a little bit.
It's one of my favorite speaking topics, actually, hope.
Oh, awesome.
When you go into a room full of people and you ask them what hope means, I would say, and this is just my rough guesstimate, 90% of people in the room see it as a passive, maybe even to some people it feels weak. It's like you're crossing your fingers, wishing something were true and hoping that the universe brings it to you.
Right. Or the Ouija board or the fortune cookie, whatever.
Whatever it is, And I've had religious people who will say to me, hope is God, because I pray to God and all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, have you ever thought that God may be sitting there going, I've sent you all these options and you keep ignoring them?
Oh, yes.
You need to take an action.
She is definitely like, listen, come on, let's go.
Yeah, there's a whole conveyor belt of options here and you're just watching them go by.
That's right.
But anyway, so we do this exploration of, what is hope and reliably the audience comes up with, as I say, this rather passive approach to hope. And I love the research by Rick Snyder and Shane Lopez and various others who've researched hope and broken it down into this, being able to have a clear vision of what it is that you're wanting, being able to see different ways to get there, even if some of those ways are highly unlikely, completely ridiculous, laughable, whatever, but being able to conjure up, maybe an alien will come down and sort of tap me on my shoulder and I'll suddenly be able to, whatever it might be, but you can visualize all these pathways. And then most importantly to me is the agency piece of, we can do things to make the outcome we want more or less likely.
That's exactly right.
And so are we doing the things that increase the likelihood? There's no guarantees. We can't hope something into existence or whatever, but are we taking the steps? Are we putting the energy towards the things that we can actually make a difference in, that increases the chances that it works out, right? I'm not going to become a speaker because someone says, you've got a really nice voice, you should be on stage, and I'm going to put you there and I'm going to give you all the training. I can hope for that, but it's not going to happen. I have to put it out there that I have topics I want to share with people, that I like speaking to audiences. I've got to contact people, reach out to people, make those connections, join NSA Carolinas to be able to make it more likely it comes true.
That's right.
Does it? We'll find out. But
right. Well, you can't be a dentist if you don't go to Chapel Hill. You know what I mean? That's just how it is.
Yeah, exactly. And so when people start to see that, I actually had one person in an audience who stood up and said, can I say something? She had come into the room by accident. I get a lot of those. I have to say, I get a lot of people who come in and
I love my lost people.
This wasn't the session I meant to come to. Fortunately, mostly they say they're glad they're there. But she said she grew up with her family saying to her, hope isn't a strategy. And she said she was going to go back. It was just before Thanksgiving, not this year, another year. She was going to go back at Thanksgiving and have a discussion with her family about this concept of hope as being this combination of, not just wishing for what you want, but also thinking about how might you get it and what can you do about it.
Yeah.
And she was really excited to do that because for so long, anytime she'd said, I hope so, this has been kind of largely dismissed. So I am a hopeful person, but I'm always looking at, so what can I do? What's the next step? If I want to make this come true, or if I could make it come true, what are the things I would need to have done to make that happen?
Yeah. And hope, it lives, I think, like in your gut, in your belly, in your soul, and it is active, right?
Definitely.
It's not passive, right?
And even that piece of the visualization, I think it's so important. I did an exercise with a coaching client once where we really tapped into all 5 senses.
Yeah.
We tend to think of visualization as sort of seeing that end goal and, there you are up on stage and people are giving you a standing ovation. Yay. But there's so many layers to it. So how did you get there? What are you wearing? What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you see in front of you? All of these things to visualize this 360, all the senses involved. And then that makes it so much more real. And I've had clients who've even, been able to step out of their apartment for the first time because instead of visualizing going downstairs and picking up the mail, which was their visualization, it's included every step to the elevator. What will they hear and see and smell in the elevator and all that. So they've done the journey already because our brains don't know the difference between us actually doing it and us imagining it. So they've had practice. They've practiced the whole process. And to me, that visualization piece is so much more than just picturing the end result.
Yeah.
Are you ready to build your vibrant culture? Bring Nicole Greer to speak to your leadership team, conference, or organization to help them with their strategies, systems, and smarts to increase clarity, accountability, energy, and results. Your organization will get lit from within. Email her at nicole@vibrantculture.com and be sure to check out Nicole's TEDx talk at vibrantculture.com.
And I just want to say on page 75, you laid it out again, the 2 opposites on the scale. There's hopeless, right? So I'm lost, like the people coming to your group. Subject to life's vagaries. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, vagaries.
Okay, tell us what that means. This is our vocabulary word of the day. Vagaries.
So vagaries are sort of the random stuff, the whims of the universe. It's the unpredictable.
So like happens.
Shit happens. Yeah. And you'll
She
notice
could put that in the book.
I love that you do this when you're with me. I'm just like, I'm just going to stick it out there. So yes, it happens.
Right. And then
you
feeling.
never know when it's coming is the other. That's the other
That's
part.
right. Okay. And then feeling out of control, lacking in a sense of future, innervated, and powerless. Right. And so I do think a lot of people are living in that space. It's a whole thing. But then hopeful is future oriented, directed, feeling in control, driven, clear, energized, and empowered. And then you went through this whole thing, but Ruth, I'm going to tease it out because I don't want anybody to miss it. So everybody get your pen. Get your pen. Where's your pen? Look for your pen. All right. And write down hope =, vision plus agency plus pathways. And so we talked about vision and we talked about agency. Talk a little bit about pathways real quick. That's important.
So the pathways piece, I always love this in coaching.
Yeah.
When someone's trying to work out how do they get from
here to there. Yep.
One of my favorite questions is, what's the most ridiculous idea you can come up with? And they, it's a bit like my alien thing. Well, an alien could come down or maybe Denzel Washington's going to show up and take me to dinner or whatever.
Right.
And the interesting thing about those to me is what happens next, and it happens in groups as well. If you're doing a team facilitation or something like that, is you throw out that ridiculous thing and someone goes, oh, that's ridiculous. We can't do that. But what we could do.
Yeah.
And suddenly you see, well, you could write to Denzel Washington, or, the alien thing isn't going to happen, but you do know someone who's actually got some input into what it is you want to accomplish, and maybe they can give you some guidance or whatever. So it sort of loosens up that creativity and allows you to go to the crazy, so that then you can start looking at more realistic pathways and saying, that's actually something I could do. That's actually something, it feels a little out of reach, but I can try it. And so it's seeing these different ways to get there, because you may get halfway down the path and find it's blocked. You've got to go back and take a different route to where you're going. But if you can see that there are multiple routes, it gives you options.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it too is, both Ruth and I have been through coaching programs. One of the best things I was ever told to do is to say to the client who is living the life or having the career or is doing the thing that you most desire to do, and how could you look at their path, right?
Yeah. Which brings us back to the role models thing, right? Look for someone who's close to who you want to be, and then consider what actions are they taking, what practices do they have. I met Jamil Qureshi, who has coached people. He's a performance coach, and he's coached golfers and people like that. And he tells this story about how he was coaching one of his clients who was, I think, a top 10 athlete, but was not making it to the very top. And the night before a competition, this guy was sitting in the bar, and Jamil walked in and said, what do you think the number one person is doing right now? And his client said, they're either practicing or they're resting. And he said, so why are you in the bar? It's like so simple that how can you expect to be the number one if you've got practices that make you number 6? So
that's right. And I will just throw this out there is, so in my coaching methodology, Shine, I talk about habit work. The people who are the best have the best habits. The higher the set of habits, the higher you go. That's what I know. That's so good. Okay. All right. So that's a really great chapter. Okay. Let's go to chapter 6, which is called Being Strong Motivation. And you've got a quote in here that I love. I actually have a little magnet with this on it with a picture of Eleanor Roosevelt. It says, a woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until you put her in hot water. That's a good one. Write that down, everybody. That's a good one. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about strengths.
So this brings us back to the character strengths assessment that I was mentioning earlier, is that so many people really, for various reasons, don't see what is strong about them, because they might assume that whatever they do is just like anyone else. Doesn't everyone do that? Doesn't everyone have that? And when I took that assessment all those years ago, it really pushed me to think about, what are some things I'm assuming about the world at large based on what I feel like, in myself? And so I feel it's really important. And there are lots of ways of doing it. I mean, the exercises I've done with speaking engagements where we're not going to take the assessment, but we do something much simpler. But when you find one of these strengths that is so important to you, and then you look at it from all angles, like what happens if you can't use it? This is very important in workplaces, I think, is if people are high in certain strengths like love and kindness, and they're in an environment where that is discouraged, they don't feel like themselves. They don't feel connected to the work. They don't feel connected to their colleagues. They don't feel comfortable. There are great research projects that have shown things like janitors in hospitals feeling like part of the care team because, hey, without the janitors, everything would be filthy, right?
Absolutely.
And yet for many of us, the thought of being a janitor in the hospital is not comfortable and may even be seen to be as menial. And in actual fact, they see, because they can tap into their strengths and see what it is they're contributing to the world and how they're doing it. And so I think it's very important that we really look at what we bring and consider that maybe not everyone brings the same ingredients in the same amount, and that we can do things in a special way because we've got this blend of strengths, certain intensities that makes us different from the person sitting next to us who apparently has got the same strengths.
Yeah, and I think that this is so essential to understand because I think maybe you might give up on your hope or your pathway or your vision or think, I can't get agency around that because I don't have a particular strength which is needed to get where I want to go. But that's when you have to call in your friends, your colleagues, a vendor, somebody to help you, right?
Yeah, someone who has got that strength.
Right.
And the reason I work with hope and bravery and curiosity is they are 3 of the strengths in the 24 that the VIA assessment measures. And I picked on those because I was doing some research on project managers, because I was a project manager for many years. And the early part of the research showed that project managers are high in hope, not so high in bravery, and are curious. And it started to make sense to me that if you have a project manager that's not hopeful, they wouldn't be able to visualize getting to the end of the project, right?
Right.
And they've got to be able to see pathways. You bump up against something, we can't do it this way. How are we going to find a pathway forward? So that seemed quite natural. And then a lot of project managers say, why do I need to be brave? Well, it might be because you have to tell someone that they can't be on your team anymore. Or maybe you have to tell the organization you work for that the project doesn't make sense anymore. There are difficult conversations about how people are fitting in with the team. There are so many things where bravery is really helpful. And then curiosity, I love that for leaders as well. And what I love to go into is that curiosity isn't one thing. We tend to think of it as, having one dimension. The work by Todd Kashdan and his team has shown there are 5 dimensions of curiosity. And you might be really curious in 1 or 2 of those dimensions and not at all in others. So I often work with people who say, I'm just not curious at all. Well, when you peel back those layers, it's like, okay, they're not curious to experience things like jumping out of a plane, but they are curious about your story. They're socially curious. And so really teasing those apart. So I focused on those 3 strengths. I could have focused on any strengths, but those were the ones that sort of called to me because they fitted the audience I was working with at the time. And so yeah, I love those 3 strengths.
Yeah. And on page 91, a great diagram. So everybody get a pen. Get a pen. Where's your pen? Make a circle. And in the middle, put the word strength, right? Because we're talking about one of Ruth's 3 things, being strong. And she says there's 4 types of strengths. And I think you need to figure out what these are. So there's character strengths. And in my toolbox, I have something called the True Tilt Profile that can help you figure out your character strengths. Then there's your values. And we already talked about that. Then your talents, right? So how do you define that? I define it as kind of like, God-given, like I just can do that. I'm good at that.
Natural, that natural ability that you have to do certain things.
Right, right. Like, so there's Yo-Yo Ma, and then there's Ruth and Nicole. who don't
But
have
on the
that
other,
strength.
but on the other hand, Nicole, I would rather be coached by us than Yo-Yo Ma.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then there are skills. And skills are kind of like things that you've learned to do over the years. You've got this ability to do it, like to make small talk and communicate, that kind of thing. Okay.
Well, and I often think that skills, the deepest skills, are the ones where their talent's honed. Because talents on their own, they only get you so far. But if you recognize a talent and then do the work to really hone that, it becomes a great skill, right? So I see those, I mean, I see them all as related, but I see those in particular as related because you can elevate a talent to being a skill that you can call on whenever you need it, wherever you need it, and you can be adaptable with it. Whereas talents are very often, you're great at running, but you're not necessarily great at hurdling, and with some practice, you can become a hurdler.
Right, right. And it goes back to what you and I are both doing at the NSA Carolinas. Again, if you're curious about that, get up with Ruth or I. But, like I have a natural knack for communicating, but like you should have a good story and a layout and some presentation skills to edify that talent, right? So really, really good. Now, she's got the same thing on page 92. I love it. So we're talking about being strong and motivations. And so she's got a list of things that define unmotivated. So let's just go through it. Unenthusiastic, disinterested, disconnected, innervated, reluctant, procrastinating. Hello. There's a list. There's a list. All right. And then motivated, excited, committed, interested, directed, energized, enthusiastic, and proactive. So I love how you're teasing these out in every one of these chapters. It's fantastic. So how are you using that in the coaching, these lists? Are you sharing that with your client or just listening for it?
Mainly I'm listening for it.
Yeah.
Because even though I wrote the book, I don't like prescribing things for people. I've got access to all sorts of assessments, and it's like I know some coaches, the very first thing they do is give an assessment. I used to do it. There was an assessment I used to use right off the bat. And so because I don't want to prescribe, I don't want to present lists to people and say, circle the ones that maybe I should do though, but circle the things that, speak to you kind of thing. But I'm looking for those things, where are they on that spectrum? Because it is a spectrum. Because to me, it's not just about where are they in this moment, but what are they ready for? If you're looking at those two lists and you've got two things that are in the motivated category and everything else is the unmotivated category, we're probably going to approach the challenge of becoming motivated differently than if you've got four things in the motivated category and two things in the unmotivated, because you're at a different point of readiness for really throwing yourself behind something and getting into something. And so I think a lot about that, about what are you actually ready for? Because people often have goals that they consistently fall short of because they haven't taken account of what are they ready to do first, and they need to move things along before they take that big leap to the BHAG, as I like to call it, the big
hairy audacious. Oh, hairy ass. But
yes,
if you say ass like that with Ruth's, it doesn't sound that bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's why a British accent helps a lot.
Yeah, I was in a room full of people, and one gentleman was in there, and he was from Germany, and he was like, and it was an NSA event. It was the CSP summit out in Arizona that I went to last weekend. And this guy says, he's like, I'm not sure American audiences are going to want to listen to me. I got this German accent. And guy leans in, he's like, Americans are suckers for accents. They're going to love you.
Absolutely. Yeah, give me an accent anytime. That's what seems to be because for a long time, people would say to me, well, you could talk about anything. And that really upset me because, I have
something serious to say.
A lot of education. I've done a lot of study and all of this. And then one day I woke up to myself and realized if my British accent is an asset, I should use it.
100%.
Not everyone has access to that. So yeah, I'll use the accent, and hopefully it means you listen more closely because you like the sound of what I'm saying. It's just a bit off-putting when someone says you could sell soap.
Right. Well, some people listen to me and they're like, where are you from? Some holler somewhere. Some backwoods country place. But anyway, okay, all right. So chapter 7 is about being brave, and this is the third thing, right? Yeah, the third thing, be brave. And it's about having conversation. And once you figure out what your vision is, what pathway you might want to try, figure out how you're going to do it. So talk about being brave.
I think we have some very stereotypical ideas of what brave is. We tend to think of fire people running into burning buildings, or the military running over the
Right, the hill.
over the crest. Yeah, and absolutely, I mean, bravery comes into that. Although so does training. If you talk to, there's a wonderful example. I think it's in Robert Biswas-Diener's book, The Courage Quotient, but it might be in a different book, where they talked to a fire department chief that went into a burning house where it was supposed to be a kitchen fire. And he walked in, appraised the situation, told everyone to get out, because his instinct, as he described it, was that it was not a kitchen fire, it was a furnace fire, and the floor was going to collapse. But he couldn't necessarily have articulated that in that moment. He just knew something was wrong. What they had gone in to fight didn't fit, kind of thing. And he got everyone out and it was fine. And they said to him, how did you realize that? And he said it was just intuition. And then when they really peeled it back, it was all his experience, all his training. He could process that information so quickly that it felt like a gut reaction, right? And then when they asked him about the bravery of people going in firefighting, he said a lot of time it doesn't take bravery. We're trained for it. Now, there may be some circumstances where it's especially risky and you have to overcome that. But we look at these people and say, oh, they're so brave. And yet, we're all brave when we do things like, a colleague of mine said, if she had been braver, she wouldn't have been afraid when she gave up her corporate job in order to start her own business. And I was like, no, it was brave because you were afraid and you did it anyway, right? And I think this is something that we forget so often. I know I did when I thought I couldn't be a brave person and have anxiety, is that we think there's got to be this rah-rah, over the top kind of a thing, when in actual fact, we're mixing up their skills with bravery. That if you have the skills, it's easier to go into more dangerous situations without feeling at risk, right? And so I think it's really important that people look at their behaviors, the choices they've made, especially the ones where they were scared to make the choice, but they made that choice anyway, because that's examples of when they've been brave. And if you can be brave once, you can be brave another time and decide to be brave. I know I feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that is so good. That is so good. And again, in this chapter, 15 questions to cultivate your bravery. So you need to get the book, work through it. And at the end of the chapter, questions to ask to increase your bravery. So it's in here again. All right, so let's do the final one. We're almost at the top of the hour. And so being curious, right? And this is all about exploration. And you kind of alluded to your study of curiosity earlier, but tell us what curiosity is and how it can help us kind of find our way forward.
Well, so I've got a mixed relationship with curiosity. So curiosity is one of my top strengths. So it's appreciation of beauty and excellence, bravery, curiosity. And curiosity sometimes needs a little bit of self-regulation on my part because I'm curious about everything.
Right. You're down a rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I see some shiny new thing and I want to do that. Or there's some new course, we were talking about personal and professional development. There's some new, I've got to take that course, and then because I'm curious to find out more about it. But what I see with a lot of people, and I think we do this to kids in school, I mean, there's the sort of trope that kids are always asking questions and then
why or whatever.
Yeah. But I know in school I was told to put my hand down because I was always asking questions.
Really? Me too.
Yes. I'd be like, but why is it like that? And how do we know it's like that? And all of this. And My teachers got together with my parents and said, she monopolizes too much of the class by asking questions. So tell her to stop asking questions, which essentially gave me this sense that curiosity wasn't a good thing, right? Fortunately, my family absolutely encourage curiosity. So I was always
Wonderful.
able to, go home and poke holes in the theory that we've just been taught. But what I notice in leaders is the ones that are curious, and it goes a little bit with humility as well, I think, is they get the best answers out of people and they get the best ideas because they're curious about what else is out there.
That's right.
Right. So
That's
you
right.
may have, from your experience, an idea of how something can work, an idea of how to proceed, but there's no guarantee it's either the best way or the only way. And when you can be curious and say, hey, I've got some ideas myself, but how would you approach this? What ideas do you have? Then you get this three-dimensional look at things. And it's a bit like the example I gave earlier when I said, what's the most ridiculous idea you can come up with? People start being innovative and creative because you're asking questions instead of prescribing something. I said earlier, I don't like to prescribe things. Now, there's a time for curiosity and there's a time for making a decision and sticking with it and not allowing yourself to get distracted. That's where I've always struggled, is because I know a lot of people. I used to project manage very highly technical securities trading implementations. And there was always the person who was still curiously asking questions about, but could we do it this way? And could we do it that way? When you're already putting the system in place, and it's like,
Right.
Curiosity isn't helpful at this time. It's just a distractor. So I think it's very important to balance it. But what I found so fascinating was what I mentioned earlier, that curiosity isn't one thing. So I am not a daredevil, try every crazy thing there is because I get a thrill out of it. That's not where my curiosity lies. My curiosity is wanting to close the gap between how much I know now and how much is out there to fill in. It's a knowledge gathering thing, a discomfort with feeling like there's more to know and I don't know it. That's my curiosity. And a tolerance for the period of time where you don't know it, that I can work through it and, got it wrong, and I'm okay with that. Other people find that very uncomfortable. So there's all these facets of curiosity. And so I think it's really important, as I said earlier, some people are socially curious. I'm socially curious, but they're socially curious, and really balancing that out. So coaches, for example, we need curiosity because we're going to ask questions.
Oh, yeah. If you declare, I'm not curious, don't get into coaching.
Yeah. The challenge is that we want to be curious on the client's behalf, not our own behalf.
Oh, absolutely.
The fact that I want to know something is not a reason for me to ask the question. But if exploring that question seems like an avenue to the client finding out something useful, well, then that's useful curiosity. So really learning to sort of pinpoint, where does your curiosity belong? How do you manage it? Just enough, not too much, I think is extremely important. And it's very powerful to be using curiosity if you're trying to problem solve, or, just if you want to be creative, you need curiosity. There's actually a direct link between, I think it's some crazy thing like, 1% more curious and you're 10% more creative or something, because you're open to possibilities that you wouldn't otherwise see.
I love that. I love that. Well, we have gotten just a hair through this book, but we've hit the big things, right? We talked about, first of all, like, do you want a meaningful life? That's where we started. I would venture to say the average bear would be like, yes, of course, I want a meaningful life. And so if we want to have a life that's meaningful, we need to be hopeful, we need to be strong, we need to be brave, and we need to be curious. We covered those 4 things. But if you want to take a deep dive, you're going to have to get the book by Ruth Pearce, right? Get a hold of this thing. And maybe that could be the thing that you do in this coming year that gets you on the right pathway, right? With the agency and the vision.
And I'm actually going to be relaunching the book in May, because it was launched in 2024, and for reasons I won't go into, it didn't get the attention from me that it should have done. And so I decided I'm going to re-release it next May. So there will, look out for opportunities to come and talk about it, and, ideas for how to work through it in a book club, and there'll be lots of materials coming out in the first half of next year too.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Well, if people want to find you, Ruth, where do they go?
Best place is LinkedIn for now, although I have to say I'm losing my love affair with LinkedIn.
Oh, no.
Well, anyway, but yes, I'm on LinkedIn, Ruth Pearce, very simple. You'll recognize the face when you see it. And also my website, which is aleverlongenough.org. And it comes from the Archimedes quote, give me a lever long enough and I will move the world.
Let's do that, people. Let's move the world forward. Let's stop complaining about the economy and the world and the people and the stuff, and let's get a meaningful life and let's change it. All right, everybody, it's been another amazing episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast with our amazing guest, Ruth S. Pearce, the author of Be Hopeful, Be Strong, Be Brave, Be Curious. Ruth, I'm just grateful. I'm glad that we're hanging out here and we're going to be hanging out at the NSA. It's been an absolute delight.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. This was wonderful.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe here and ring that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. Your support helps us grow and reach more like-minded leaders committed to building vibrant cultures. Remember, the journey to building a vibrant culture never stops. Stay inspired, keep nurturing your vibrant culture, and we can't wait to reconnect with you on the next episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast.